Yes. And to be fair, you know, both left and right are getting in the way in some senses of the fix. So that's why it's beyond politics, because neither one of them is acting with the urgency that we need. Hence why we say we're beyond politics. Thank you. And Laura, sorry, Laura, my apologies. Can you tell us a bit about where you were when you first discovered that the crisis is as bad as it is, and what was your pathway into activism?
So I think, yeah, realizing as bad as it is, I think I knew for a long time, but realizing that I can also contribute in trying to do something about it. I think I realized when I was back in Brussels after my studies. And there I got in touch with someone from More Than Enough, which is another activism group that's centered around degrowth. And I think for me, it was the first time that I saw some kind of like pretty concrete plan or like a concrete thing that we can work towards, or also quite positive. I think like it has a really positive side to it. And yeah, I immediately felt that I wanted to put my energy in that. And then I also got in touch quite quickly with Growth Skills. More Than Enough is a group that's doing more like kind of political lobbying. They're in touch with like forming with unions and talking with parties, whereas Growth Skills is more non-civil disobedience, but both are centered around this topic. And then when I went to Germany for my PhD, I kind of felt that I wanted to continue this path of degrowth, which is why I'm also really happy that Scientist Rebellion is taking on this as a campaign, because yeah, this is a topic that I realize I want to focus my energy on. Yeah.
So yeah, Scientist Rebellion, and I think any groups in the climate space that understand sort of the crux of what's going on is, yes, we care about the climate and ecological emergency and planetary boundaries and the poly crisis and coming collapse, but it is all being birthed from our economic system. And I think a lot of people understand that sort of generally. And I would love to facilitate for people the ability to speak to exactly how to connect those dots. And I think that's something that we'll look at trying to do later on in this discussion. But you said something that I found really interesting about direct action versus like lobbying or political work, because there is an inside outside strategy, as it were, and some people work in more policy space, and others like us have chosen nonviolent civil disobedience. And I'm curious, I would love to hear from both of you actually, what made you choose NVDA versus working in policy or the plethora of other groups that are doing amazing work as well.
Maybe I'll take this one. Yeah, well, I guess it's much like Extinction Rebellion or Just Stop Oil. We feel the need for a more radical voice and to try to shift the overton window. And I'm not sure our program actually isn't that radical in that it doesn't implement a full program of degrowth as you can find it in the degrowth literature. But however, to the general public, it may sound completely crazy. And for that reason, yeah, we think it's good to do crazy actions. And yeah, to make it more normalized and to make, of course, people listen more to the less radical actors. And nonviolent civil disobedience in our mode of action also is important because we target conferences, because we're based in Brussels. Of course, those are more Eurobubble-based conferences. And it is very strong. It is, in fact, yeah, really powerful to have access to these Eurocrats, to these super powerful people. We disrupted the vice president of the commission, and to actually talk to them, provoke them, force them to answer. And a few times we got applause, and applause from, for instance, we got applause at a conference that was called Competitive Europe. It's unbelievable to find out that that audience in the Euro bubble is actually thinking about these matters and that they're ready for it. And we hope that by doing so, we can encourage them to start a discussion, you know, perhaps amongst themselves. They can open up and say, hey, what do you think about what these activists were saying?
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
see,
for
yeah, go ahead, Laura.
no, I just wanted to answer also the question about non-civil disobedience. That I think for me it was really I was actually couch surfing in Poland, and there the person that I was couch surfing at had this book about it was written by this guy in Serbia who like also used this as a method, and I read it in one night, and I was like, ah, that's so beautiful in a way. And I think there are so many historic examples of where it was useful. And I think in that moment I realized like it's a method that I see myself using as well, or that I want to focus on.
Well, thank you. I'd like to welcome Runaway. Thank you for joining us, Runaway. I know that there's a lot in your schedule to fit in. I appreciate your being here. Would you mind just giving a quick introduction of yourself and sort of how you got into activism? Because right now the question that Lobster and Laura were just discussing was about why they chose NVDA, but I would like people to have a sort of picture of who you are as a person and what brought you into activism. And then maybe you could take on the why you're choosing NVDA instead of policy work or something else.
Cool. Can you hear me well? Because Zoom isn't always the best for me. Yeah, I'm sorry I'm late. It's technical difficulties of being on Linux and Zoom and things like that. Yeah, so I think for me, in terms of activism, I was for a long time I was doing the kind of activism of going to marches, going to doing things like doing the petitions, doing that side of the kind of activism. And that was about when Extinction Rebellion was just starting up, and I think it was the first time I'd seen that kind of civil disobedience that was a mass group of people, and not just going on a march, because I've seen that. I've been on marches many times and been kind of very disappointed. Like there was a big anti-war march I went on years ago, and the war still happened. It wasn't like it was this, you know, it was this truly huge group of people, and nothing changed. And it was a bit depressing, really. And yeah, then saw them doing this kind of mass action rather than the kind of small solo type actions where it was just, you know, people disrupting an oil rig or something. It was more accessible to everyone, but still disruptive. And that felt like a really powerful difference. It wasn't like, you know, these few brave people doing some crazy climbing or something. It was accessible to everyone, but actually something where you could kind of get some kind of response from the authorities. So it kind of drew me in that way. And then yeah, I think while I think there's a lot of important work to do with in things that aren't activism, I think there's a lot of policy work, you said, for example, to do. It's just I think it's part of a whole picture. I think we need to be kind of really both kind of pushing the Overton window so that we're kind of pushing the ideas of what people find as as something that other people agree with, and also it's a way of really like spreading the ideas to other people that wouldn't otherwise listen. If you know you stand somewhere and try and tell everyone who's passing by something, then everyone's going to ignore you because they think you're selling something. But it's something you can do with activism is really like bringing information to people who would otherwise not listen, and they're kind of pushed to listen by the fact that you care enough to do something kind of relatively extreme for, at least for a lot of people. So yeah, I think that's why I chose that approach rather than other approaches.
Beautiful, thank you. I know there was a lot of questions to heap on you at once, so I appreciate you dealing with that so deftly. So now I think just to understand how growth kills evolve, like how did you guys find each other? How did this idea become birthed and break off from the groups or the work that you were already doing? Who would like to take that first, at least? Lobster, go ahead, love.
Yeah, it's like a year and a half ago that we came to the conclusion that it was time to advocate for degrowth, and we felt there is a real lack. Actually, it's a blind spot, but it's not a blind spot. It's the whole thing in activism. That's, you know, targeting fossil fuels or perhaps more pesticides, more specific problems, but at Extinction Rebellion, we say we're for system change, not climate change. Everyone knows it, but we don't do anything about it. Whereas we should see the whole picture. And I must say that at Extinction Rebellion Belgium, I realized that from the beginning, when I joined 4 years ago, this degrowth message, the message about you know, that green growth is nonsense, that you really need to debunk that. And that decoupling is not happening. All of those were present and really influenced me. I heard about those over the years and came to the conclusion that this was actually the main cause, I think, for activism to fight for at this point also, because 4 years ago, not everyone was anxious about climate change or the environmental crisis. But now the vast majority of the population, at least in global north countries, are anxious, they are aware, and they wonder what they can do. And probably we believe they need a narrative, they need a positive picture of the future, something, you know, to mobilize them. They need something they can believe in, because they're completely disillusioned with the political system and they feel powerless and depressed.
Indeed. Thank you. Runaway.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think for me at least, yeah, it felt like, I mean, a little bit like my last story, it was getting a bit frustrating, feeling like I'm constantly fighting against symptoms. And it was that feeling of like, okay, well, we've got a big win. We've managed to stop them, I don't know, cutting down this forest, or we've got them to not build this gas power plant. And it's like, okay, we've stopped them doing one thing that's going in the wrong direction, but it's still the broad sweep of things is going in that direction. So it's a kind of, it feels like an overwhelmingly massive task to fight all of those things that are going wrong. And so what can we do to kind of fight the system that is making things go in that direction, so that we can push the whole thing in a better direction, instead of trying to fight each of those things individually and kind of yeah, spending so much time trying to save one little piece of the whole picture.
Yeah, I totally hear that, because I feel like there's so many wonderful groups that are focusing on just a symptom versus the root cause. And while all those symptoms do need addressing, yeah, I personally also very much feel that if we had more of those bodies throwing themselves on the levers of society on the root cause, that would then take care of the symptoms. Agreed. Laura, is there something that you want to share about sort of like exactly how you guys came together and the decisions that birthed Growth Kills as a group?
So I have not been present from the total beginning, so I cannot say much about how it completely started. So maybe it's better if Lobster or Robert answers the question. But I also wanted to say that, or add that, that I think indeed is sort of like going to the root, not only about environmental, like it's all so much connected to so many different fights. And I think that that's what is so powerful in my view about degrowth, because there are so many fights that are worth fighting, but come together in this view. And I think that's really, for me, big reason why I put my energy in this.
I think you highlight something really important there, that so it's not Extinction Rebellion and the sister rebellions like Scientist Rebellion, Mothers Rebellion, etc. We're not just about climate change, right? We're about climate justice. And the reason why we say that is because it is an intersectional problem, and the economic system is an injustice machine. It depends on inequality. It depends on extractivism and exploitation. And so we come from the perspective of climate, but it is essentially, it's a fight for justice, for all living things, you know, animals, human and non-human, and planetary systems. There was something that you had said, Lobster, when you were talking about green growth is nonsense. And I would like you to dig into that just a bit more, because sorry, that wasn't a direct quote, paraphrase. But essentially, I think there's still a lot of people probably here right now or watching on the live streams who have a lot of hope and faith in green growth, or at least like green, not tech fixes like carbon capture and storage that everybody knows is ridiculous and unscalable and too expensive and is just a way for venture capitalists to make money and for a way to placate the public. So we think it's being fixed when it's not. But I mean, things like, renewables, etc. Like, so that's part of what some of the green growth model is looking at. And so can you, and others please as well, delve into why, like what the exact problems are with green growth, especially for people who are feeling so reassured by something that might not have, the actual reassurance therein.
Well, yes, so to build upon the intersectionality of all struggles, ultimately the root cause, and I think everyone would agree that the root cause of all the problems is the race for profit at any price. And well, green growth is considered a business opportunity, for investors. And that's the reason there's kind of abuse in how they believe you should always grow more. Whereas, well, nothing in nature grows infinitely. So obviously, in history, the economy would always have recessions and just crash. And this will be no exception. Economically speaking, infinite growth is suicide anyway. If you see, there will be a financial crisis, there will be an economic crisis with austerity measures, as always happens cyclically. But this time it will be exacerbated by the ecological crisis, which will make it so much worse. And just to mention an example that's not related to climate change, well, just indirectly, 70% of the food production depends on pollinators, and we're killing those pollinators with pesticides, etc. We just need to really fundamentally change our system. And if you think of energy, for instance, you're talking about renewables. Of course, to make more profit, companies want to make it, they just want to fill the earth with windmills and with solar panels, which also consume resources, which also pollute and make people suffer in the mines in the global south, for instance. But no one considers truly, what about our consumption? If you look at consumption of energy, how much can we do? Now we're talking about insulating all homes. That's a very good evolution. But generally speaking, what would happen simply if you take the Paris Accord, what happens if we just decreased our consumption by 55%? Like, that's such an easy solution. Okay, there would be agriculture, there are other factors, but in effect, I think there is a fundamental antagonism between profit and the decrease in resource consumption that is necessary. That's really crucial. And also there is decoupling. Decoupling is really the idea, and that's the ideology, the fundamental ideology of green growth, is that you can have infinite economic growth, which you can't have anyway, and combine that with a decrease in consumption of resources, in carbon emissions, etc. And maybe in an ideal world that would be possible. No one knows what technology will bring, but fact is it's absolutely not happening worldwide. The emissions keep going up, the consumption of resource keeps going up, and this is really crucial. They want to make us believe, oh, accelerate the economy, invest more in technology, technology will save us. But it's not tangible. We don't see it happening. And the Paris Accord goals are right now. The biodiversity crisis is right now. So yeah, we need to move fast. And to move fast, we have to decrease our consumption of resources, whatever the consequences would be for the economy.
Yeah, it's something I just want to intervene just to make it clear for everybody watching, because this is being live streamed on multiple platforms, and maybe not everybody is an activist and is exposed to the same kinds of papers and studies and research that we tend to look at pretty regularly. What you mean by decoupling is that people argue that we can still have capitalism and a growth addicted profit model for our economic system, and that we can break that apart from resource use and greenhouse gas emissions. And there is actually, for people who registered to the Zoom, there is a link to a paper from the excellent Timothée Parikh and a number of other people, where they had a meta study of 835 peer-reviewed studies about whether you can actually decouple those things, and if you can actually have GDP growth and resource use decoupled from climate and biodiversity impacts. And the answer was a resounding no. Those things are not able to be unrelated. So where you have GDP growth, you will always have climate destruction. So I just wanted to clarify that again, just to make sure we're all sort of on the same page. Runaway, Laura, did you want to add anything to what Lobster had to say?
Yeah, I wanted to say a couple of things. One was, yeah, I think even if you take some level of decoupling, it would have to be a kind of absolute decoupling where there's no link at all between the growth of the economy and the resource usage, because it's just making a job harder. What is it, 2.5% growth per year means doubling the size of the economy in 30 years, which means, so okay, you can say you can decarbonize decarbonize a minimum the economy, then you have to do that whole thing again within 20 years. So even if you have some kind of light level of decoupling, it's still you're still increasing the amount of the stuff you have to make not impact the world around us. But the main point I wanted to say was there's a lot of kind of carbon focus in the kind of green growth narratives. There's a lot of like, oh no, we can move to renewable energies and we don't make any carbon dioxide. Or there's a lot of carbon neutral technologies like growing biofuels and then burning them to make electricity, and using some of that electricity to capture the carbon again. But that's then influencing all of the other planetary boundaries. For example, that uses a huge amount of farmland to grow biofuels, which are monocultures and hugely damaging to the ecosystems. So it's kind of spreading. If you choose to spread the damage in other areas than carbon emissions, then you can maybe decouple carbon emissions, but you can't decouple all influences on the world around us to be completely decoupled from growth. So then any amount of growth means you're increasing the amount of damage on the world around us, and we're already past the boundaries of what's possible, like what can be supported. So we have to decrease rather than increase. There's not a lot of room to play with. Yeah.
Indeed. And a lot of these measures feel like they're just, again, more kicking the can down the road while more destruction is being wrought upon our planet and our lives and all life. but I feel like so much of it is just to placate people. Like, things are being done, don't worry, or this is the new dream that's going to fix everything, instead of doing what we actually need to do, which is ramping down growth, ramping down resource consumption, resource use. And well, sorry, Laura, I wanted to make space for you to, if you wanted to feed into anything with that,
Yeah,
because
I
there's
just
something
wanted
else
to
I'd like to, yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to add still that about like technofixes or even just renewable energies and stuff like this. I think that it's really important to know that we are not against innovation, or like it's not that that this is something completely unlinkable with degrowth. I think that it's degrowth is about creating a conversation about what is needed to live like a life that makes you happy or satisfied within planetary boundaries, which makes everyone be satisfied within planetary boundaries, and what is needed to do that. And I think that for that we can use also innovation, but it's yeah, as Rolway and Lobster also already talked about, like it's being used a lot as a narrative for growth, which is not really good. But I think it's important to say that it's not that we are against innovation or technology or yeah.
Yeah, we're not Luddites that want to go back to living in trees. Exactly. Lobster, go ahead, Lob.
Yeah, I want to add also to build up on Laura and say that degrowing the economy, abandoning GDP as a measure of economic success doesn't mean exit capitalism. It doesn't mean that there would be no economy at all. It just means you have to control it. And there being an economy, indeed, there would still be innovation. It's about getting rid of the excesses and accepting that the economy could degrow. But yeah, it doesn't mean that history wouldn't keep going forward, or there wouldn't be as many or more, actually, just more innovation and progress for the well-being of people, because that's what matters, of course. It also doesn't mean, you know, the energy sector needs to degrow, agriculture needs to degrow, or at least meat production. But healthcare and social security and other sectors that are good for everyone's well-being and our survival, they still need to grow. Or at least, maybe it's not that they need to make money and make profits, but at least they need to become bigger.
Innovate, yeah, as well. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things in there. Sorry, go ahead. Did someone want to say something? Oh, there was. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think so. For me, one of the things is that people link our current system with innovation because there has been a lot of innovation brought by that, but it's a side effect of people profiting from the innovation, and just because that system led to a lot of innovation doesn't mean that you can't have innovation without it. It's like we're not going to dump the innovation that we've already had from that. It's more that like we'd want a system that can be more focused to the kinds of innovation that is actually helping people. So for example, how much of the research is done based on government funding and things like that isn't necessarily based on profit. And look at how quickly you can make a COVID vaccine if you have funding going directly towards innovation rather than people just relying on profit to make that happen. It's that kind of thing that can lead to better innovation rather than relying on it being, okay, someone is profiting from this, therefore we're going to have innovation.
Yeah, somehow for thousands of years, humanity has managed to innovate without a profit motive, right? To figure out tools and all kinds of things. And when we talk about technology, so many people are thinking of like mechanical things or yeah, digital things. But there's so many land-based, earth-based, and earth-supporting and life-supporting technologies that we have that we are not even considering in the adaptation model, because those are not, you can't make money off of, a lot of the things that like we would need in those kinds of adaptations. The other thing that is alive for me, because we talked about consumption, but it's also why is there such an addiction to growth? Why is there such a profit model? It's not just, yes, people want to make money and we've all been sold this indoctrinated lie of like you're nothing or you're not as good a person unless you're rich, that we don't think consciously that we believe, but that is messaged at us all the time with celebrity culture and that kind of toxicity. But I think it's the why behind all of the resource use and consumption and the profit, which is how our money is created, and that 97% of our money is created from debt. So like banks just create money into existence when they give a loan, right? It's all just digital thing to dollars in an account, and economies have to grow to be sure that those debts with the interest is going to get repaid. So that's it. It comes down to what we value and what we use as currency. This shared metaphor that this dollar or this digit in a bank account is significant of something that has value. But the problem that I've always seen, and that like Minor Rebellion talked a lot about, or still does, not in the past tense, is that our economic system is a choice. And a lot of us look at it as though it's some monolith that's existed for all time and that is always going to exist and there's nothing you can do about it. So to Lobster's point, yeah, it's not about the fact that there's not going to be an economy, but we have an economic system right now that values the dollar or like the currency, the money, at the expense of everything, including our lives. And we should have an economy that, and we can choose, we have the power to choose an economy that serves us, that actually values life, because we have an economic system that doesn't have any value for a tree living in existence, doing its tree thing, supporting biodiversity, fixing the water table, supporting the mycelium, whatever, because you can't monetize that. That tree is worth, millions of dollars in what's contributing though, but our system, our economic system, sees no value in that until you kill it and cut it down and sell it all for pieces and make profit and ship it to lots of places, and that's the problem with the economic model, is that in any economic system that doesn't value life at its core can never be justly applied to life and will always create injustice. So yeah, that's my little, like the question behind the question of why the addiction to growth. Sorry about my little soapbox there. Right. So no, but this is about you guys. So tell me more about growth kills and what kind of actions you've been focusing on and why those particular actions.
So we have been mainly focused on disruption of conferences. So we are centered in Brussels, as was already said. So there is the EU, which we were mainly focusing on EU organized conferences. And pick any conference, it's about growth, or green growth or anything. So basically you can always go to any conference. Okay, but we try to find conferences that are in the topic of green growth, competitiveness, anything that's in that area. And then we basically try to do some research to find something specific to say about that conference. Then we go there, we disrupt the conference, and basically choose a few people from our team that then speak up and say what we have prepared. I think that's mainly what has been our activism. Then we also sometimes spray paint, we have tags, we put posters, but yeah, the main thing is the conference disruption. And I think for me personally, why I think it's a kind of efficient way to go, or something that I like to do in a way, is that because it's quite, you just, after a few times that you do it, you know what you want to say, so you don't have to prepare so much anymore. It's not super energy time consuming, because I'm thinking about sustainability of activism also, and but it has impact. It has impact in direct impact on the people there. Also, I think it's Yeah, as also Lobster mentioned before, like you get a response from the public or like the people that are at that conference, which I think is quite interesting also. Not like it's mixed, but always interesting. And then also you feel present in these institutions. And I think that that's something that gives me at least power, the feeling of power.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. Go ahead, Lobster.
Yes, with Extinction Rebellion, we're used to blocking things, blocking factories. But the problem then is you have your banners or you have your press release, your social media, but you don't confront, you don't have the conversation straight with the powerful, with those people. And when we go to Eurobubble conferences, but also party conferences, we've done that, like Belgian parties, but it doesn't matter. Are we considering annual general meetings of big companies? You can confront them straight with their own contradictions, because their discourse, they're always talking about accelerating the economy to facilitate the ecological transition. And yeah, of course, that's just bullshit. And ultimately, they will bullshit their way out, always. But the audience will understand that. They will see that they actually have no answer. They cannot react. And that way, we always win.
That brings to mind something you had mentioned about one of the questions you always get from people is, what do you actually say at these conferences when you're disrupting? Because you do have a short amount of time to make your impact before security or so what kinds of slogans do you use? What do you feel is most effective?
Well, so we have banners first for slogans. So our primary slogan is growth kills, very simple, but we also like fuck GDP, because for those who understand GDP, they find the fuck funny, which is popular in the Eurobubble. And in terms of the narrative, everyone can make up their own, but the core point, of course, is this contradiction that there is no decoupling. So you need to explain that, and to explain that degrowth makes no sense, and that they're lying. They want to make us believe that you just need more and more and more always, whereas we do need less. We know that we need to decrease our consumption of resources. So that's the very point. If you can point out this contradiction, that this is nonsense to say we need more. No, we need less. Perhaps not less money. That's not the problem, right? It's not about, we don't want to decrease economic growth per se, or to contract the economy. It would be okay for the economy to grow if only it was socially just and it would enable us to survive. What's important is this diminution of resource use and of pollution. And it's important to show that it's not possible without rethinking the economic system. And yeah, that's the main point. Of course, you can always look at who the speakers are, and you can make some research and to find their contradictions. Of course, one day we had a representative from Airbus. Okay, she didn't stand a chance, right? There was a representative of Intel. That's a bit harder, because last year Intel halved their CO2 emissions. But then you need to think about how about the consumption of resources? How about those minerals they use in their production? And how about the energy consumed by the end users of their processors, whatever, of the whole supply chain? So you need to think a bit and just show, you can show with the examples, when there are representatives of the private sector, you can just show as an example that their business simply will never become sustainable. And then you can add a question, you can add a question also, like, do you believe, if it's to politicians also, do you seriously believe that there will be decoupling at some point? Do you seriously believe that we will reach the Paris Accord objectives? Look at the curves, look at the evolution. Like, when will the inflection point be? We need all this by 2030. When will it even start decreasing?
Yeah, and to your point about like it's not necessarily about economies contracting. I mean, I think financial contractions based on the fact that there isn't real decoupling with financial growth and resource use. I think financial decoupling seems like it would be necessary, but I think economically speaking, economic growth can still happen if we have an economic system that values life and sort of the things that we actually need, which is not more stuff, but you know, more time with our family and friends, more work that feels purposeful, etc. Those kinds of economies can grow like crazy because those are the things that we actually value as human beings, that we've been hoodwinked out of and that we've been atomized out of into this aggressively individualistic, like, you know, sense of disconnection from the planet and nature and each other and ourselves. So we've, yeah, just become good little consumatrons, as George Sacraclides likes to say. I think one last question for me, and I know we have lots of questions in the chat, so I definitely want to get to those. One thing that I want to address is that I know there's a lot of concern. Okay, one of the challenges we face in lots of activism is having to upskill and educate the public about the thing that we're advocating for, because they're being kept in the dark about the problem because the media is run by the same billionaires that are using this profit model and nobody wants to educate them. So one of the things that we always face is this challenge of having to educate people so that they can care. Runaway, sorry, did you want to say something, love? Or
I had a response. I wasn't trying to cut in. I was just thinking of
yeah,
response to what you were just saying.
I will come to you first. And so I guess the question I was getting on my way to is essentially that some people hear degrowth, particularly in like the global south, and they're like, but degrowth to us means poverty, right? It means like our economies, which have already been historically suppressed by global north banks and companies, like why should we have to degrow when we've already been extracted from and, you know, over exploited? Like, so I wanted to talk about that piece of it, but Rolway, feel free to respond to what piece you want to respond to first.
Yeah, so what I was going to say was part of the good thing about degrowth in that sense is that right now so few people in the world are questioning growth as a necessary and positive force, that I feel that even if people don't agree with us, they ask the question, why are those people against growth? Isn't growth a good thing? It's already a step further than they're going right now. And that's not to say that's going to be the whole picture, of course, but it's at least it's, you know, something that's having a power already without even them understanding anything beyond the fact that we're against economic growth per se, like as an aim. And so yeah, I feel like that softens the need to kind of explain, because there is a lot in there, and that's also why so we try and not use the word degrowth in a lot of our messaging, is because people hear degrowth and they think we are asking just for an end to growth on its own, which means we would then be going into some kind of recession, which is of course not what we're asking for. So basically there's a lot behind the like not having growth as an ideology that we're trying to kind of carry with with not a lot of words. So yeah, it can be quite difficult, but that's again why we're kind of trying to kind of step away from using degrowth and try and talk more about how growth can be a bad thing as well as a good thing, and why it's not necessarily good.
Yeah, I also think it's really important. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut
No,
you
go
off.
for it, go for it.
I thought you were. I was like, I think it's necessary and important to underline in this upskilling of people's understanding about the ideas around degrowth, that it's not just austerity slashing growth across the board for everybody, right? It's about the just transition and the fact that some economies will need to grow because they have been historically suppressed, and that there's a justice model to it, but the degrowth that we're focusing on is specifically for are the societies that are overrun with consumerism and stuff, and all this sort of surplus profit addiction that is not actually serving human happiness, which studies have again and again proved that beyond a certain baseline point of income and needs being met in like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, more money doesn't make you happier by any means. It oftentimes can have the opposite effect. So I wanted to quickly just hear from Lobster, and then I wanted to hear what your demands are, and then we'll take questions from the audience.
Yeah, I think some people think we should get rid of the economy, but that's quite a nonsense, because by definition, an economic system is a system to allocate resources between production and consumption, so people can get the resources they need. And our current economic system, neoliberal capitalism, does that to some degree, but also it provokes a lot of inequalities and a lot of wealth that a few people, a few rich, actually don't need. And also half of the world's food is being wasted. And it's marketing is constantly pushing us to buy products that then break after a year or two because they're programmed to break. So our production this economy is extremely wasteful, and the important thing is to learn, well, to control it. And to control it, I read here in the chat, do we need to nationalize essentially? Well, yeah, in a way, yes, certain sectors definitely need to be nationalized. I wouldn't go as far as saying that everything should be nationalized. It should be more controlled with taxes, and perhaps some sectors that are beneficial could have still a free market and competition. But what matters here is to make sure to organize the economy in an efficient way to not destroy things, not produce and waste things, and to get everyone what they need.
Laura Rollaway, did you want to share anything, any other ideas? Or I wanted two things. One, to hear the list of growth kills demands, because I know that you don't talk specifically about degrowth in your demands. The other thing that I'm just going to drop a link in the chat. There is my favorite article that I will share everywhere from the Foundation for Economic Education, and they, well-respected foundation. They do school curriculums. They have an article about our current economic system and how it's the one thing that we really kept from the Nazis and the fascists, that it's essentially a form of economic fascism. It's a beautiful article that I hugely encourage people to read, that I'm a huge advocate for. So I'm going to drop that in the chat. And then I would like to hear from whoever would like to share, from whomever, whatever, English teacher in me, apologies, would like to share your list of demands that Growth Kills makes.
Yeah, I can list them. I don't know them by heart, but I have them here. So just saying. I also think it's important to say that these list of demands is like we came up with them, but they are flexible, like open always for feedback. And I also think it's important that every country or every group sort of makes these demands, like adapts these demands to whatever context they are in. Or however they see fit. But yeah, our demands are ban consumerist advertising, make companies pay the true cost of their activities, ban and cap overconsumption, pool resources, and create a sovereign citizens assembly, which is something that's also important to us because it kind of focuses on this thing of, in the end, it's about creating dialogue about what is needed, and this should be a democratic process everyone is involved in. And that's why we think, in a way, like we thought about this, that it could be actually just our one demand, because in the end the demands can be all decided by sovereign citizens assembly. But yeah, these are our demands.
Lovely, thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Lobster.
Yeah, to be honest, our website is due for an update, and we've been discussing to rearrange the demands. We're not quite sure how to put it, but as a first demand, it's very important that we ask that governments abandon GDP as an index of economic performance. As for, ban consumerist advertising, we could also add obsolescence, but just generally speaking, it's just get rid of consumerism and have the government or the states, whichever way the state is organized, have it ban consumption of wasteful products and or cap it, just control the economy as much as necessary. But fundamental in our approach, which is basically fundamental in all writing on degrowth, is the idea that citizens should have a say and even control the economy. So we want democratic control with the sovereign citizen assembly, but at other levels, perhaps at the level of production also, because we believe that citizens who are empowered and who are aware, who are informed about the challenges, take simply together, they take more rational decisions than governments take, because they are under the influence of shareholders and companies, essentially.
Excellent. So I know that there's been a lot of questions in the chat, and I love the engagement. And I know, Runaway, you've been working really hard to answer those, and I appreciate it. So rather than sort of slowing down this question and answer portion by me trying to see which ones have been addressed and which ones are still alive, I'm just going to ask people to raise their hands if you still have a question, and then you can, or if you're not comfortable being on camera on the live stream, I understand. I'm not going to spotlight you on the video, but if you don't want your voice to even be here, you could just like restate any questions that are still open for you in the chat so that we can organize them well. I'm just going to keep an eye out for any hands. Oh, Aiden, I'm gonna unmute you. Go ahead and ask your question, love.
I'm on mute now. Hi, I think this whole thing's great, and hi Tatiana, I haven't seen you in ages.
I miss you so much. Go ahead.
What I'd be mostly interested in is when you've done these actions at the conferences and stuff, what have been the responses from the people that you've been sort of protesting? Like, is there like sort of main themes that they criticize us back on for this? Yeah, that's you know, what feedback are you getting when you're protesting this, like good or bad?
Thanks for the question, Aiden. Go ahead, Lobster.
We barely get any feedback from the audience. We disrupted perhaps 10 conferences. Twice we did get applause, and those were Eurobubble conferences. So that's just fantastic. That's everything we want. The other times we are not sure what they want, or what they think. Some of them insult us, of course, but it's always a minority. And perhaps to talk about the reaction of the organizers, security forces will always intervene, but actually what we do is completely legal. And for them to use violence is illegal, so we have every right to be there. And usually their reaction is about pressuring us, perhaps in the worst case, pulling us by the clothes or something, just pushing us out, harassing, if you like. But we do get time to yell as long as we want, essentially, which is really good. And a few times even we were invited. That was really gracious by private sector people. Actually, they invited us. They offered their chair and they said, "Okay, let's have this conversation." And it worked out quite well because we could always respond and have a long discussion. And actually, that time, the one I think of, where we talked for like half an hour with them, that's one where we got applause.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. I wonder, yeah, if people want to get engaged with Growth Kills, what would be the best way to do so? I would like to give people a pathway if they're interested. Because I mean, Scientist Rebellion is adopting the growth, like going to coalition with the Growth Kills movement for its ongoing campaign. because obviously the economic system is a problem, like what we see as a problem as well. But I mean, if people want to get just involved independently in growth kills, what would be the best pathway to do so? Yeah, Laura?
I think, I mean, I think that scientists are in a perfect position to do this because you have access to institutions, you have access to conferences, you have access to things that others don't have access to. And I would use that access to basically put these topics in the spotlight in whichever way you see fit, whichever way fits best to your context. And I think looking at our sites, other resources, looking at our demands, adapting them to your own context, which I think, like, once you start thinking about it, it's so ingrained in everything that it will be easy to think about ways that you can do something with it, and then trying to use these resources, use these demands maybe in actions that can be like disrupting conferences or disrupting talks. Like, this is, I think, really possible, but also other things are possible. We have some suggestions also on our site. Yeah.
Is there a way that the Growth Kills group can help offer support to people who are looking to disrupt conferences as well? And also, what other targets are there? What other actions can they adapt this Growth Kills sort of model to? I know you've done mostly conferences thus far, but there could be potentially other targets, and what support can people anticipate?
Yeah, so you have the action group, signal group. So anyone can there contact us if they have any questions. We are all in there. I can speak for myself that you can always message me if you have any specific questions, if you want to call for any preparation or any kind of resource needed. And then I think other like targets would, because I'm also active in Scientist Rebellion Germany, and I was thinking about how can I immediately put that into action in Scientist Rebellion Germany. And for example, we have been thinking about that there's this pension fund in Germany which is related also to scientists, and it's I mean, the growth narrative is in everything, and so we were thinking about going to one of their events, and then in a way also disrupt it in, so it's not like a maybe political conference, but then like you can find also maybe like talks from specific people at universities or things like that. Yeah.
Go ahead, Lobster. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah, I want to add that it's very important for us that anyone can make an action and do whatever they want. And I mean, it's not, we found out that disrupting conferences works well as a mode of action, and it works well for us. But if other people have other ideas, it's even better. The more ideas, the better. What matters here is the core message. What matters here is system change. And the fact that green growth is a big lie and goes straight to the ideology that's at the core of this economy, which wants to make us believe, this economic system and ideology, that we're all selfish, and that's how how the world functions. Like, we would all try to maximize profit, although it's a small minority of sociopaths essentially who think that way.
And who would sacrifice, yeah, any number of lives for profits. There is someone who has been asking repeatedly in the chat about, do you advocate your members to disconnect from tech? Is it treated as system disruption? Which is ironic considering we're in a Zoom meeting, but yeah. I mean, it's been repeated several times, so I just want to make sure that the question gets addressed.
I can try and do that. So I think, I mean, first of all, I think technology does have a part to play in setting up new ways of working and changing the economy into something that doesn't require growth to exist. But I also think that it's not, we're not saying anywhere that people moving away from technology is a bad thing. It's more that it's not something we're focusing on because we aren't. I mean, I feel like I've said this a few times in the chat, but we don't claim to have all the answers, and any small group of people who are not experts on a wide range of issues aren't and are claiming to have answers to everything are probably making something up. Basically, we're saying that we know the system needs to change, and we want people to be given the power and the time to be able to look into all of these issues and make their decisions. And that's how citizens assembly work. You know, it's you get you like jury duty, you get paid to you have your wages covered while you're doing this, so it's, you have the freedom to really take the time to learn these things. We don't have the freedom. We're stuck in the system where we have to be working all the time in order to stay afloat. So we don't have the time and the energy to be learning all the answers to these things. And I do think that there will be less constant connection involved in economy that's degrown, because there's a lot more focus on local, because that means less transport, less moving things around unnecessarily. So I think, yes, there will be less connection, but it's not something we're pushing for as part of growth kills.
And it's funny because, you know, like a lot of the right-wing talking points are like, they're going to restrict you to 15-minute cities and you won't be able to move out of your zone. But the idea is actually think about the resilience that gives people and the autonomy if your things are locally sourced. It's not about limitations. It's about strengthening your own ability, like, to survive when things like COVID or other pandemics that we know are coming, et cetera, happen, right? And environmental disasters, of course, as well. There's a question about, the more I think about the implications of this campaign, the more I think existing powers will see us as a serious threat if we become successful. What are your thoughts about how to prepare for how they will attack us? Do you have a billionaire bunker we can all share? No, just kidding. Yeah, but what, or even like what messaging? Because I know there's, you know, there's lots of talking points about supporting capitalism. We've all been at some point or another indoctrinated in it, you know, so there's innate support for it because of the thinking, and that therefore the propaganda works really well. So, but what are your fears? So it could be messaging wise, but it could also be, you know, there are very powerful people who are absolutely not going to brook this message or any success in such a campaign. Is that something that you've considered, and what steps do you take, or what steps do you perceive having to take to protect yourselves? Lobster?
I think we didn't seriously consider, but it's a good question. I agree that it may be perceived pretty soon as a big threat, a bigger threat than say, yeah, other activistic movements. But essentially, I will speak in my name because we didn't discuss it, but I can imagine the movement growing bigger and bigger, and then the model would be much like Extinction Rebellion. I believe that the model of Extinction Rebellion ultimately is to block the economy and inflict economic damage, to force the government to take the necessary measures. But I'm not sure, Runaway and Laura, what your viewpoint is on this.
Well, I think also, yeah, Extinction Rebellion uses economic disruption to get attention, because otherwise, you know, as Rollaway mentioned, infinite numbers of marches and petitions and whatever, and marches are so ephemeral and they come and they go and nothing has changed. The street sweepers come, the posters are cleared away, and it's like it never happened. And it's because of people's desperation to get the truth to the public that that is being withheld from them. Like, I think that's, at least for me, one of the greatest injustices is, like, at least equip people with the ability to know what is happening to them and what's around them. And the fact that, you know, there's just going to be people dying and never knowing why, and yeah, that the injustice of being so lied to so fundamentally by all the systems in our society is something that I cannot bear. And none of us can say like we know the standalone truth of things, but there's something about being closer to truth and not being so callously lied to that is real for me. Sorry, I was a bit of a tangent. I think Julia, did you have a question that you wanted to ask?
I see Laura has her hand up.
Oh,
Still?
Yeah.
sorry,
No,
Laura, go
no
ahead,
worries,
love.
no worries. Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly that I think that as a movement, degrowth tunes into so many like core things in that many people are feeling, but maybe don't have the time to or space to really completely realize. But I think that that's or I hope that more and more people will be, and I think it's something that will also become by force because of environmental disasters just increasing. So we'll be forced to in a way degrow and in a way to think about these things, and so I think as a movement there will be more people that will join it in a way. And of course, there are strong operators that will not be happy about that and that will try to not let that message be spread, or that will try to do something about that. But they are still acting from this like profit-based like idea. And I think that degrowth is tuning into other things. It's tuning into like care. It's tuning into the core of well-being. What is it that we need to be fine? And I think that will automatically continue. And yeah, I think then personally for me, this is something that I'm willing to do. Like I go for it. So for my personal safety, in a way, I'm just like let's go. And I think as a movement, it will not, I think, be silenced, or because it's tuning into this core. It's like an automatic thing, I think.
Yeah, and yeah, I'll come to you just 1 second, Lobster. I think one thing that's important to underline as well is that there's a huge and growing movement of very especially economists, like heterodox economists who you know, advocate for degrowth that people I don't think are aware of. And so, you know, like Jason Hickel, I mean, there's a whole list of them. But yeah, Lobster, I don't want to delay your point too long. Please, my love, go right ahead.
Yeah, actually, to build on that, and I read in the chat that in the US, the idea must be truly heretical. Yes, it's important, but there seems to be a massive disconnect between the academic world and the population, but even between, I will speak for Europe, but the Euro bubble, European politicians and the population, because actually, and this is a core argument we use all the time, 85% of climate policy researchers advocates either degrowth or growth agnosticism. So in any way to abandon GDP. There has been a report like 3 years ago, I think, a long time ago, by the European Energy Agency that advocates to abandon GDP also. There was a report by a think tank, a research center of the European Parliament, which said the same. Now, there seems to be dissonances inside them and between their politicians and their researchers, but you have really good arguments. And actually, the IPCC, as an article by Timothée Parric pointed out, the IPCC mentions degrowth 27 times. The IPCC report, the third part. They don't say it's the solution, but they say it's really time to start the discussion on it.
Thank you. And Alice, I see you have your hand raised. Go right ahead.
Yeah. There's always a lot of talk about how you put pressure on governments and people and whatever. But I don't see much talk when it comes to talking about like degrowth or A growth, did you call it? that's actually focused on the physical infrastructure that we need. Like it's like I've been talking about hot water. That's something that we can provide quite cheaply. There's like a lot of countries have district heating systems, and it's one of the main, probably the single biggest contributor to quality of life. And what am I trying to say here? Yeah, I think a lot of the opposition comes from the fact that there's not much focus on this is what the world could actually look like. There's a lot of it is just we need to cut growth, and what people associate with we need to cut our resource consumption by fourfold is they look at the countries that have an energy consumption that's 4 times lower, and they go, "You want us to live in shacks?" They don't see the possibilities that are there for having long showers, warm homes, decent-sized homes, cheap transport on trains and stuff. They don't see those possibilities because we're not really talking about them. So, yeah, I just wanted to get
Runaway.
thoughts on that.
Thank you for your question, Alice.
So yeah, I think so. With that, I think you're right. It's very easy to get focused on the things that we're saying no to, especially, for example, in writing out the kind of narrative of growth kills. There's the demands, and demands in themselves. There's something that you're asking to change, and it's very hard to put positive things in something like demands. But that's one of the reasons why we tried to put things about the commons in there, about moving to more sharing of resources rather than kind of the individualist approach to resource usage. So then, yeah, it's kind of moving to things like managing hot water or public transport or other things like that communally, means that then you're actually using much less resources than if you're kind of doing it in a more individualist way. And it's one of the favorite things. So I'm originally from the UK, and the National Health Service over there is actually so it's completely socialized healthcare, and it's actually incredibly efficient, and it's slightly falling apart because it's been underfunded for decades. But it's amazing how little money per person is spent on healthcare when the healthcare is fully socially run, compared to, say, the US as the worst example that comes to mind. But there are many countries with partially socialized healthcare systems that are less efficient than that. And yeah, it's really that kind of thing where you can have nicer things if you fund them well, unlike the NHS. And yeah, having that communal approach to how things are run rather than having a kind of individualist profit focused one. So then, yeah, we're not going to focus on individual issues such as hot water, because there are so many of them, and that's kind of the problem. That's why I at least preferred the idea of growth kills over a lot of the other movements, because they're focused on more singular issues, whereas this is focused on a system that causes a lot of those issues behind the scenes.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Runaway. Go ahead. I think that's a great point though about how beautiful a world we would have if we could have more choice in it, and engineer it to our needs and loves instead of other people's profits. Lobster, go ahead.
Yes, I must admit that we didn't focus so much on building a positive vision of the future. And when you were talking about public transport, not only should you explain that we need and say that you need public transport for everyone and efficient, but also probably to provide an image of everything that's possible with such public transport and what it means in practice and what that life would look like. Unfortunately, we didn't have the capacity to really build up the narrative beyond that. But I want to say that Julia shared the contact, the Scientist Rebellion at ProtonMail email address, and that we're very happy to collaborate and to try to elaborate more narratives and subtitles and Q&A for a website. We want to, yeah, sure. We want to work together and grow bigger, and we're sure that many people, many of you have many good ideas we didn't think of.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. I think that something that happens in activist messaging a lot is that we're so strident on the things that we're advocating for and wanting people to understand that it's a balance, right, of both like the harm that's being done to you that you don't know about, but also like the beautiful future, because it's not just, it's about the inspiration as well. Speaking of inspiration, I usually at the end of these Scientist Rebellion talks, we do a quick little like overview of Scientist Rebellion that I'm going to launch into now. So thank you, obviously, to Runaway, Lobster, and of course Laura for all of your work and your amazing activism and the self-sacrifice. Scientist Rebellion is really excited to be combining forces with you for our campaign, and yeah, just growing the understanding about degrowth, essentially. So I'm going to just go through a very quick number of points about the science and the what Scientist Rebellion is about. And I don't know if I did that right. Am I spotlighted? Is someone else spotlighted? I don't know. Okay. Oh yeah, no, I still have, okay. No, I'm just figuring out tech things. Sorry. Thanks. Okay, I think we have it now. Let me share screen very briefly. And let me know. Julia, can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen?
Yep, yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, fabulous. So just a quick overview of Scientist Rebellion for those of you who may be unfamiliar. So virtually all countries have agreed to prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system in 1992. But today, CO2 emissions are 60% higher than they were then. So for 2023, which is, yeah, not a new normal, because it's going to keep getting worse. We saw disaster everywhere across the world, record-breaking temperatures over 1.5 degrees Celsius over baseline for the last, I believe, full year in a row now, 12 months. Over 20 million people are being displaced every year in the world, 41 per hour, mainly women and children. And climate catastrophe will always equal exacerbation of existing social injustice and amplify that, because those who are already hurting will hurt first and worst, right? So global carbon inequality is losses versus emissions and capacity to finance, and we can find a more equitable way to make everyone more resilient, but our current model isn't set up to do that. The IPCC in 2022 said that any further delay in concerted anticipatory global action on adaptation and mitigation will miss a brief and rapidly closing window of opportunity to secure a livable and sustainable future for all. But the world is planning to produce more than twice as much fossil fuels by 2030, and that would be compatible with limiting warming to 1.5. So as well, this is not an issue to do with information or communication. Everyone is producing the data, but the scientists aren't being listened to. This is a problem of power and our economic system and those who hold the financial power within it. So we need to be rethinking what the role of scientists and engage with how social change happens. Sorry, just moving something slightly out of my way. And our global movement is formed mainly from scientists and academics from all disciplines and all levels. Also, you don't have to be a scientist to be part of Scientist Rebellion. I am not a scientist. So it's scientists and their allies, their supporters, those who want to advocate for the science. It's about scientists putting themselves on the line to get arrested, to heighten this as a problem for society for people to notice their sacrifice and think, well, maybe there really is something wrong if even the scientists themselves are now engaging in this. So it's about engaging in civil disobedience, protest, and disruption. We're a decentralized group and horizontal, meaning we don't believe in the traditional sort of hierarchical organizing. We try to be as distributed in power and organizational power as possible. We have over 1,000 scientists and allies in over 30 countries. And if you would like to join us, there is a QR code there, and there's also the donation code at the bottom. So we have country level actions. You can start a local group. We need a lot of help on like the back end with things like comms and social media and producing these talks. So we both have like local group actions and country level actions. And then we also do global campaigns and internationally synchronized protests where we're sort of all doing something on the same day or week. It's really, really inspiring to be part of a global movement and feel this family of activists across the world who are all pulling in the same direction. And Scientists on Trial specifically needs your help because we have many scientists on trial who have undertaken these actions, and over 50 of them right now are facing trial. So we would really appreciate anyone who could donate to help support their legal fees and lawyer fees, etc. And if you want to reach out to us, we're scientistrebellion@protonmail.org, and that is our website, scientistrebellion.org. So it would be lovely to have more of you joining us. We definitely need help with all the things, as many activist groups do, but I really hope that everyone found this talk informative and helpful. Thank you again to Growth Kills for joining us, and thank you to everyone who has been watching this both in the Zoom and on the live streams. We really appreciate your attendance and your time, and looking forward to seeing you at the next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.